A week or so ago here on the channel, I did a video analysing E750 in Camp Cretaceous, the mysterious contained dinosaur. Now, we spent most of the video going through all the information we had on the creature, and then at the end went through a couple of the most popular theories on what E750 could be. Well, it turns out there's a lot more than that. Tonight we're going to focus 100% on what those candidate dinosaurs are. We're going to go through many different options. What's the most likely to be in the tank based on what we see and hear in Camp Cretaceous, and in other Jurassic World properties. There are going to be spoilers ahead, of course, for probably just about everything, but we've got a lot of dinosaurs to cover, so let's get started. First up then, we have the Troodon, which is probably the most popular theory that I barely touched upon last time. The driving force for this theory is the new Camp Cretaceous Troodon toy that's been released. A particularly interesting toy because the colour scheme and the patterning is very reminiscent of the Jurassic Park the game Troodon, which is a terrifying nocturnal hunter that I think a lot of us really liked. It's also not too dissimilar to the creature we see inside the tank. It's got more of a frill than spikes, I would say, on the toy, but there's a chance for that to change, or they couldn't render the spikes on a toy, or indeed the shape in the vat isn't necessarily what we're going to get. And I do want to address that quickly. There's three main things we have about E750 information. The first is the shape in the vat. The second is the audio of its cry. Now for those two, they are kind of subject to change, could well be placeholders, but they're also the best information we have right now. So I think dinosaur viability has to be based on those two factors, along with general storyness. Made sense, leave me alone. I would say the Troodon just about stretches into believability based on those factors, and it would be a good fit for Camp Cretaceous. Personally, I see it being more of a secondary antagonist than the inevitable big bad that E750 is being built up to be. You've got to remember, E750 has had 2 seasons of build-up now. You've got to remember things like Eddie saying, "They have no idea what's really going on here." Would he say that about a Troodon? I'm not so sure. Because of this, I give the Troodon 5 Eddies out of 10 on the E750 scale. RIP Eddie, never forget. I also still think E750 is likely to be a hybrid, and that's where most of this video is going to focus, but I do need to address this. I'm still getting comments about Trevorrow saying there will be no more hybrids in the Jurassic World franchise. I know several people have done videos on this and talked about this, but it's wrong. Trevorrow did not say that. Conclusively, definitively, he did not say that. He said Dominion will have no more hybrids, and that is it, that is all he said. He also made those comments back in 2018, a full 2 years before Camp Cretaceous would even hit screens. That doesn't confirm E750 is a hybrid, of course, but we have absolutely no reason to rule it out. In fact, given the look of the vat, and in particular the genetic markers from Season 2, as well as the monitor that Brooklyn looks like, I'd say there's a lot more evidence it is a hybrid than it isn't. We'll talk about a few non-hybrid candidates later on again, but if it is a hybrid, what are those likely candidates? One that's floated around a lot recently is the Spinal Raptor from Jurassic World Evolution. This may be the most popular theory other than the Indoraptor. Whilst there's no spikes on the Spinal Raptor like there is on E750, there is some pretty compelling evidence otherwise. The first and smaller piece of evidence really is that the monitor Brooklyn looks at in Season 1 contains images of both Spinosaurus and Velociraptor, the 2 dinosaurs that would go into making a Spinal Raptor hybrid. There's also 2 other dinosaurs though, so we need a little bit more than that. For me, the most compelling piece of evidence for this is actually the cry we hear at the end of Season 2. It's a high-pitched shriek. It's a pretty terrifying noise, and it's unlike anything we've heard in Camp Cretaceous so far. It is also remarkably similar to the noise the Spinal Raptor makes in Jurassic World Evolution. I'm going to play them both for you now, first the E750, and then the Spinosaurus. Now, aren't they crazy similar? Spinal Raptor also got a very popular reception when it was introduced. It's definitely one of the coolest looking hybrids we have, and it would be a great antagonistic dinosaur for Season 3. The shape is a minor downside, so I'm going to knock off a few points, but I'm giving the Spinal Raptor 7 Eddies out of 10 for believability. It's definitely up there on my list. Another hybrid that I didn't address at all is Early Dominus. And if, like me, you have no idea what that was, well, that's because it's a hybrid invented for Jurassic World Alive. It's a hybrid of Indominus Rex. Remember, Wu would have had access to Indominus Rex DNA before leaving Jurassic World. The submarine trip wouldn't have had to take place. and the Dilophosaurus, which is a herbivorous therizinosauride. You know, the theropod herbivores with large claws like Therizinosaurus. The resulting creature then is a therizinosaur with this carnivorous Indominus Rex looking head and a huge array of chaotic spikes going down the back. I'm actually beginning to really like this as a theory for several reasons. And the first is those spikes. They're chaotic, they're jutting out everywhere, just like the ones E750 has in the vat. Secondly, the Indominus Rex roar, just like the Indoraptor and the Spinal Raptor, does occasionally have this high-pitched shrieking noise to it, so the noise could absolutely fit, especially given it isn't an Indominus Rex but a hybrid between the Indominus and something else. Furthermore, we know that Wu was working on a Therizinosaur hybrid. Way back in the first Jurassic World film, 6 years ago now by the way, crazy, there's a monitor that shows us an image of a Therizinosaur hybrid briefly before it flashes away. Now whilst it doesn't look the same as early Dominus, instead it has features more representative of say an Amargasaurus, I'd say it's another point generally speaking in the creature's favour. This has actually become my favourite theory on the dinosaur, and it's going to receive a staggering 9 eddies out of 10 on my stupid made up scale. That does mean it's usurped my previous favourite choice, that E750 is an Indoraptor prototype, either a more aggressive, rough looking earlier iteration, or even possibly the white Indoraptor we know was initially planned to exist in Fallen Kingdom. The roar is on point again, all these Indo hybrids love a good shriek. And whilst the spikes on the back are a little bit thicker than the proto-feathering of the Indoraptor, this would be an earlier iteration, so we can't really rule it out on that basis. It's also a very popular dinosaur, one that would suit a more horror-focused season 3 of the show, and one that would inevitably clean up in toy sales, as well as providing a nice link to Fallen Kingdom. If the early Dominus wasn't such a good fit, this would still be my top choice, and I still think it's very, very possible. A few people mentioned in the last video that the Indoraptor was made in Lockwood Manor, so it can't be, and of course it was made in Lockwood Manor, but that doesn't mean at all that Wu wasn't already working on it in Jurassic World. As our Lord and Saviour Eddie once said, they have no idea what's really going on here. Basically, Camp Cretaceous can take us in any direction they want to. The roar fits, the theming fits, the only thing that leaves me hesitant is the spikes, and for that reason the Indoraptor gets a very respectable 8 eddies out of 10. Now I've referenced the spikes on E750 several times in this video, but I know some of you interpret the vat shape very differently than I do. This is how I see it, roughly. The vat is very clearly worn down and dirty and stained, and I think that obscures a lot of the natural shape of the creature. I'm fairly set that this is a back and a tail though, it's just the way it tapers downwards heavily suggests tail more than any other body part to me. I've seen suggestions that the spikes are in fact legs, and that we're looking at an arthropleura or something. That popped up several times in the comment section of the last video, and I really have several issues with that theory. First, well, that would be a humongous step for the franchise, and one unlikely to be taken in Camp Cretaceous. 2, the spikes are irregular, they're different sizes, all of them, very unlike insect legs. And finally, the spikes all come out straight to a point. They don't have the segmentation that an arthropleura would have. The cry at the end was also not insectoid in nature, really, at all. I give this theory 1 eddy out of 10, I'm afraid. Sorry to the arthropleura stands out there. If I'm wrong, feel free to come back and mock me endlessly for it. I could very well be wrong on all of this, but these are my personal opinions and theories. Another theory, probably breaching the top 5, is that it's a Spinosaurus. I saw a Reddit post about this recently as well. I'm not going to use their image that they drew, but let's just say the placement of the lines was, in my opinion, stretching believability to a breaking point, whilst also not addressing the prominent spines on the creature. But even ignoring all of that, the main problem with it being a Spinosaurus, or really any creature that's been publicly discussed like the Spino, the Mammoth, the Dilophosaurus I see keeps coming up as well, it's that E750 is being built up as a huge reveal, as something secretive that Wu was working on even under the noses of Masrani. Both Masrani and Deering had no idea what Wu was up to. But Jurassic World had a Spinosaurus paddock, and we've seen Dilophosaurus in the past. Now, we don't know if that Spinosaurus paddock was actually filled, but the fact it exists in the first place should mean E750 can't possibly be a Spinosaurus, because why would it require such secrecy? The Spinosaurus and similar dinosaurs then receive a lowly 3 eddies out of 10. It just doesn't make sense that they would be secretively locked away in a vat in this hidden underground bunker of a room. It just doesn't fit the story. Now that doesn't mean those dinosaurs won't appear. I'd love both Spinosaurus and Dilophosaurus to appear, and I think they've got a good chance. I just don't think they're E750. There's a few other possibilities I've seen bandied about. Maybe the Indominus Rex didn't actually eat her weaker sibling, and it was kept in secret containment by Wu. Maybe it's a juvenile Giganotosaurus that we're going to see introduced before Dominion. I think timeline-wise there might be some problems there. I think we've covered most of the popular opinions. Now some of you will likely dislike this video just on the basis of me shutting down things like the Spinosaurus, but this really is just my opinion, and the fact that people are interpreting the vat shape in so many different ways means it is clearly up to individual interpretation. When coming up with theories, I would just make sure you're considering the whole picture, the shape, the sound, but also how it folds into the greater story, because that's where the problems arise for most of the theories I hear. Personally, I'm going to put my money on the Indoraptor as the most likely, because I think early Dominus might be just a bit too much of a deep cut to make it in. But I do think the early is a better fit in total for the information we currently have. Does that make sense? You know, it's kind of like, whilst I think the early Dominus fits the information better, I think the Indoraptor is still more likely because of the franchise in general. I think that makes sense, right? Either way, if you enjoyed this video and would give it 10 eddies out of 10, then please consider throwing me a like and a subscription. Remember to leave your own ideas and theories down below as well in the comment section. Maybe just because I don't agree with your idea or theory doesn't make it wrong, doesn't mean we can't talk about it and have a good old time anyway. Thanks for joining me, cheers myself as always, bye bye.